my parents met each other at a time when they were both very much in need of refuge. In the years preceding their first date, a blind date, they had been dealing with divorce and death and the ways that childhood trauma kind of shows up in our adult lives. So they met and fell in love at a time when they really needed each other. They got married, and the very next day, they packed up all of their stuff and moved with my older sister from a Midwestern city to a southern suburb. This was in 1982. I was, after that, very much conceived in love, born 2 years later, and they made a promise to each other and to baby me that they would protect me from all of the pain and trauma that they had experienced in their lives up to this point. And with the best of intentions, they decided to do that by telling me that everything would be fine. Constant reassurance that everything would be fine no matter what. So in seventh grade, my uncle passed away. It was my dad's younger brother, it was his best friend. And my dad was the best part of my day after school every day. He was the first person who greeted me at the door. He held all of my very important seventh grade secrets. I told him all of the drama. But after my uncle died, I remember coming home from school, and instead of being greeted with a big smile, he was just sitting in this armchair in the living room, staring into space. He didn't even make eye contact with me. So after a few days, I waited for my mother to come home from work. I remember I trailed her up the steps while she's taking off her pantyhose and her pumps. And I'm just like, hey, Mom, something's going on with Dad. What are we going to do? We have to help him. And she just said, it's okay, sweetie. He's going to be fine. She gave me a hug and sent me on my way. So I came of age without any sort of language for worry or sadness or anger or uncertainty. And I carried that well into adulthood. So in addition to guaranteeing that I would need therapy as a grown person, which I now go to gleefully, this kind of engendered two qualities in me that I held on to. And the first one is that I always felt like my feelings were wrong. If everyone that I loved and trusted is telling me everything's going to be fine, and I don't feel fine, and it must be me. And the second thing is that one way that you show love to people in your life is that you protect them from your own feelings and the ways that you don't feel fine. So that's what I did well into my adulthood, and even still sometimes now. So let's take coming out, for example. This is a pivotal moment for most people. And for me, there was this sort of inner life and outer life. So my outer life, I am playing it cool. I just switched pronouns. So I'm telling my friends, instead of having cool weekend dates and hookups with he people, I was having cool weekend hookups with she people and they people. I played it cool and my friends played it cool back. And on the inside, I was terrified of having to tell certain members of my family and trying to figure out what they would think. So I would go to work, and on my lunch break, I was working at a bank, so I'd go downstairs into this disgusting single stall bathroom, and I'd sit on the floor and regularly have these panic attacks. So sometimes I would hyperventilate or dry heave or cry, and 5 minutes before my lunch break was over, I would just splash cold water in my face and go back to work. And this was my norm. I was in grad school, nobody noticed because I always had bags under my eyes, so there was no way to know. And that is how my emotional life worked. That was my sort of norm and everyday until I met Jay. I love the story about how Jay and I met. So I'm at this unbearably white private women's college in New England, and Jay is coming into town and became roommates with a colleague of mine through the wonders of Craigslist. They decided to throw themselves a welcome to town party, which I am jealous that I had never thought of that. Said to my colleague who was roommates with them, hey, invite some people. I want to meet new people. I was one of the chosen invitees to come to the party because I am Black and queer, and Jay is Black and queer. This friendship story has a wonderful happy ending. White people do not do this to your one singular friend of color. It doesn't always work out that way, but in this case, it was awesome. So I get to my friend's apartment for this dinner party. I've been there, a million times before, and I'm immediately greeted by this person, this amazing person with a huge smile and a big bear hug, like, hey, I'm Jay, it's so nice to meet you, welcome, thanks for coming, are you hungry? And there was this like amazing food. There's like brisket and potatoes and seasonal bougie vegetables. I've never known somebody who was not Jewish who just whipped up a brisket for a dinner party, but alas, this is the caliber of person we're talking about. So the party itself, don't remember who was there, don't remember what we talked about. We were sitting at this like wooden table in the kitchen. Jay and I are sitting on opposite sides, and I'm laser focused on this person who has the most incredible energy. But even more than that, it's like looking into a mirror. Throughout the night, we're like reciting lyrics to musicals that we both love because we have the same favorite. And then we're talking about our sports teams that we all like the Kansas City Royals. At that point, the Kansas City Royals had not had a winning season since the year after I was born. So meeting somebody who had the same favorite baseball team as the Kansas City Royals outside of Kansas City was like not a thing that happened. And here we were. But even more than that, it was like looking into a mirror. Watching Jay at this party was like watching somebody live on the outside all of these feelings that I was feeling on the inside and had no words for, and this full range of emotions that I had felt but never embodied. So dinner's winding down, people are finishing their drinks, conversations are doing that last lingering thing, and out of the corner of my eye, I noticed Jay angrily doing dishes, like throwing them into the sink and rinsing them off and dunking them into this dish rack. And, I have home training, so I kind of saunter over sheepishly and I'm like, hey, can I help you with the dishes? And Jay turns to me and says, you don't ask somebody who slaves over a meal for everyone if you can help with the dishes. You just fucking do the dishes. And I am immediately mortified because I have manners. Of course you just do the dishes, but I'm also socially awkward. I don't know how to just do anything. But before I can get fully into my emotional spiral, Jay also turns and says 5 seconds later, also, you're fucking awesome and we're going to be friends. So if it is possible to fall in love with your best friend at first sight, that is essentially what happened to me. And I had just learned that those affections were returned from this person who also in that space like rescued me from this terrible, terrible moment of tension. And we were inseparable after that, like twins. We just did everything together. We went to museums together, we watched sports together, we watched movies together, we went out dancing together. And eventually I started noticing that Jay's behavior towards me started changing because they were noticing things about me that I didn't know people could see. So when we would go out dancing and drinking as 20-something queer people do, suddenly it became routine for me to come to Jay's house first so that we could eat together. Because they started noticing that I would forget. And then when we did all of our dancing and sweating and drinking and all of that good stuff, we would come home and Jay would walk me into my apartment and literally tuck me into bed, knowing that if they didn't, that I would just anxiously stay up all night. And then we would have these deep talks with each other, which we did all the time. Sometimes they would put their hand on top of my hand because I'd be trembling from being over caffeinated and a lack of sleep and forgetting meals. So this all comes to a head one day when we're in the car, we're driving to, I don't know, a museum or whatever our Saturday fun was that day. And we're listening to Toto because we both love Toto. And Africa's our jam. We're getting ready to get to the crescendo when the key change is going to happen. We get to a stoplight and Jay just abruptly turns the stereo off all of a sudden. Turns to me and says, there's something fucking wrong with you. You've got to go to the doctor. You've got to go to a therapist. I will be right there with you, but if you don't, I'm going to be pissed. I had never felt so profoundly loved by someone who wasn't related to me in that moment. No one had ever risked a friendship hurting my feelings, making me angry, for the sake of putting my well-being first, which was something that I was not doing. And that was the seed. That was the seed that sort of started my mental health journey. So now I go to therapy regularly, and I very shortly after that got diagnosed with anxiety disorder. And that would not have happened if this incredible person hadn't told me they were not fine with the fact that I wasn't taking care of myself. So in the years that followed, we moved to opposite coasts, but we were always as close as we had ever been. When we visited, it was like no time had passed. We were just inseparable, like one person. And when we were apart, we had Skype dates, tea dates over Skype, which was one of our favorite things to do. So I made all of my life decisions, good, bad, or otherwise, with the cosign of my mirror always. And then a couple of years ago, I got a call on a Saturday night from a number that I didn't recognize. I was home by myself. Picked it up out of curiosity, and it was from Jay's sister, who told me that Jay had died. I remember stumbling awkwardly through that conversation. I said something really stupid, like, hang in there, before we hung up. I sat on my couch in the dark, stared into space, just like my dad had when my uncle passed. I really, really wanted my heart to betray my brain in that moment. I wanted it to break. I wanted to cry or scream. I wanted to feel something, but I was just numb. I couldn't do it. And I stayed in that numb space for the greater part of a year. I retreated into myself completely. My mirror was gone, so it was just like walking around the world in darkness. I was unbearably sad, completely heartbroken. But if anyone asked me how I was hanging in there, I would just say, I'm fine. But eventually, one has to learn to make life decisions on my own. So my first big leap that I decided to take last summer, I left what was a lucrative and fancy academic job, but ultimately soul-crushing, to become a public school teacher because I missed teaching and I missed working with young people. I made a commitment to my students before I had even met them that I would not tell them that I was fine if I wasn't fine, that I was going to show up as a full person every day as much as possible. And I did. I kept that commitment all year, good, bad, and ugly. And in response, every day, regardless, I got unconditional love back from them. And I didn't realize how healing that had been until a few weeks before quarantine. A few teachers and we took our students to the Social Justice Summit. And at the end of the Social Justice Summit, they had all of these young people create self-care plans. And one of the things you had to do in your self-care plan was make a list of all of the people in your life who would be your support system at your lowest moment. So one of my ninth graders, Dr. Russell, can I show you my self-care plan? Of course, sweetie, you can show me your self-care plan. What does it say? And when I got to her page with her support system, I was the only adult on that page. And then I realized that if I had made the same list a few years before that, Jay would have been the only person on my page. And in that moment, I guess I realized that this kind of love, this radically honest love that I thought was only going to show up in this person who's not here anymore, showed up in my students every day, all year. And more importantly, it showed up in me when I thought that that person was gone. But they're not. Thank you.